We're now moving on to the third round.
Josh Harder and Mateo Bedoya. Josh, you will go first. Our local communities have been inundated recently with racist stickers and propaganda appearing in public spaces. Are you aware of this issue? What can be done at the local level to curb this? And what can you do federally to work on the issues of racial equality and racism still evident in our country?
I am aware, and I think we can't stop but begin at looking at the top, right, at what President Trump has been doing by encouraging and supporting white supremacists with the tacit support of the entire Republican Party, including Jeff Denham. I was sick to my stomach watching the marches on Charlottesville. I'm sure many of us were. I thought we were well beyond that discussion, but apparently not. And we've seen it here just in our own community, right? Nathan Domingo, one of the students at Stanislaus State, one of the people behind some of those stickers, was one of the organizers of Charlottesville. So we know that implication happens here. What can we do about it? Well, we can have political leaders that actually say things like Black Lives Matter, that actually do something about it, which is what I believe. And second, we can actually push towards changing some of the underlying discrimination that's been happening for far too long. One of the things here is the undercutting of the Voting Rights Act, which has led to systematic voter suppression all across the country. In 2013, the Supreme Court cut out the heart and the soul of the Voting Rights Act. That's a bill that's been around since the 1960s. What happened after that was states like Texas decided to do a lot more of those voter ID laws that lead to more voter suppression. That disproportionately focuses on minority populations. We need to stand up to laws like that and make sure that those communities are not being silenced, that their voice is being heard, and ultimately that our political leaders are actually standing up for the rights of folks and not letting it trampled by a small, vocal minority that is unbelievably extremist and wrong.
Thank you.
Can I get the question one more time?
Oh, good. Okay. Our local communities have been inundated recently with racist stickers and propaganda appearing in our public spaces. Are you aware of this issue? What can be done at the local level to curb this? And what can you do federally to work on the issues of racial equality and racism still evident in our country?
I will say I am aware. I think sometime around last year, everybody started seeing more pickup trucks waving a flag for a specific reason. And then also throwing, what's it called, those stickers that you're talking about on the back of their trucks. There's not much that we can do there in terms of free speech, but if someone's threatening somebody's life, if it crosses over into a threat, that's different. We have laws to protect against that. That's why I don't know exactly how much more I can say about the issue. I come from immigrants, you know, I understand that type of story, and I also have friends who've been in this country for years. You know, I'm not one who's going to limit free speech, while at the same time you have to keep talking to people that disagree with you. But there's no tolerance for violence. That's why we have laws against that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh, rebuttal, 1 minute.
The other key issue here is criminal justice and sentencing reform. 1/3 of Americans have an arrest record. That disproportionately targets minority populations. Over the last 20 years, as violent crime has plummeted, we've seen our prison population skyrocket. What I want to do is make sure we're reducing mandatory minimums for nonviolent drug offenders, that we're putting resources towards combating recidivism and actually making sure that our resources are put towards rehabilitation instead of just more punishment, and that we're focusing on keeping our communities safe from violent criminals and not just putting more people in prison. That's what we need to do.
Talking about these issues is great, but I will say it was the Democrats led by Clinton. It was bipartisan, but that increase basically doubled down on bad criminal justice approaches and increased truth in sentencing and mandatory minimum laws. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. So it's going to take a different type of Democrat to get things done. The reason we have these issues is because, and my platform has continued to talk about this, is we need to solve our economic problems. If people have the dignity of work, of getting a job, knowing what it is to pay your bills and basically playing the game, you're not going to go out of your way and say, hey, they have more than me, and why do they have more than me? That's reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Virginia Medueno and TJ Cox, with Virginia answering first. Since the last presidential election, especially public acts and demonstrations of racism have become prevalent. Racism in America is alive and well and focused on our minority community, refugees, and our international allies. What issues do you believe need to be addressed, and how would you specifically work in Congress on these issues?
Racism has been around for as long as I've been around in this community. A lot of people have talked about what we all collectively bring to the table. The Me Too movement started what? Recently. I was dealing with those issues 9 years ago, 8 years ago. The issue of racism, I personally was dealing with in my hometown of Riverbank, when I was being given the Hitler salute inside of City Hall, outside of City Hall, outside of my home. Nobody wanted to talk about the issue back then. I confronted the issue by taking those individuals to court. Until we start holding people accountable, until we start calling it for what it is, we will continue to have these issues that don't belong in our community. When I got that message that Ann Coulter was coming to our community, I was one of the first ones who said, are we going to stand and be able to take this? Are we going to stand and say that this is okay in our community? It wasn't just me. There were a number of individuals that were here in this community who said, we stand, we must stand together. And we sent a very loud message to the elected officials and to the community members of this community. Ann Coulter was not welcome. We need more accountability at all levels so that racism at all levels is eliminated.
Let me share with you a story in my family about discrimination and racism. During World War II in the Philippines, that's where my mom's family was. And after the war, my grandma, she noticed that there was a certain segment of our troops that were being discriminated against. Didn't have any place to go when they got off duty. No social clubs, bars, restaurants. And so she took it upon herself to open the first and only social club for our African American troops in Manila. I mean, that's the type of justice and equality that serves in me. And what we can do, and we have to be an advocate for these discriminated groups, is stand up and safeguard the laws that are already in place. The Civil Rights Act, Title IX. We need to fully fund EEOC, which provides equal opportunity for all of our citizens. I mean, our human rights are rights for all of us, not just the only select few. And that's what I'm going to do in Congress. I can tell you, in my firm, we make investments all up and down the valley. And over 80% of those investments are to firms that are led by either women or minorities. And we work in all the very poorest places in the Central Valley. And out of all the investments that we've made, do you know how many of them have gone bad? Absolutely zero. That's where we should be making our investments and making our mark to change the lives of the people that truly deserve it.
Virginia, 1 minute.
1 minute. So it's interesting to see where we all lie in terms of all of these issues. But really what we should be discussing tonight is where we are right now with our current leadership. Do we truly have a leader who has responded to this community? Do we truly have a committed congressional leader who has represented us and our interests? And the answer is absolutely not. When I take a look at what our community is made of, and when you take a look at this district in particular, we are almost 47% Latino, and yet we continue to fall by the wayside. We have got to start raising the bar and raising our numbers so that we have a diverse, elected
10 seconds.
board, whether it be at the school board, at the city council level, on the board of supervisors, at the state legislature, and in the United States Congress. We must start looking like our communities.
Absolutely. Diversity is not our problem. It's our promise. It's what we should be achieving throughout the government, throughout our boardrooms, in every sector of our lives. That is the true value of America, because we know what the immigrant populations bring. We know that through a diverse population that is working for all of us, that is how we're going to get ahead in the world. That is what is going to allow us for all to achieve the American dream. And that's why we need a congressman that stands up for all of our populations. Not one that's going to stand by and let white supremacists and call white supremacists equally good men on both sides. I mean, that is outrageous. But we cannot allow Jeff Denham and the rest of the GOP to continue to enable this guy. And so we're going to do something about it. And that's the first thing that we'll do in Congress. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Sue Zwollen and Dottie Nygaard. It is easy to say that, quote, racism is a problem in our country, unquote, but it's harder to address systemic racism at the policy level. What specifically will you do when you're elected to Congress to address racial inequality in our financial institutions, schools, and our justice system?
I will continue to do what I have been doing, specifically for the last 8 years. And I will say that I was inspired by a person such as Bobby Kennedy, who I shook hands with 2 blocks from here on his whistle-stop tour on his way to Los Angeles 6 days before he was killed. He was a person that spoke up on this issue, and I've always admired him for it. I have had the opportunity to advocate for enacting the California Voting Rights Act right here in Modesto, and being one that voted to go to trustee area elections so that we can have a more diverse school board, as was mentioned here this evening. I was able to put that forward and to vote for that to actually happen so that you all had the opportunity to do that in the last election. I'm inspired by people that speak up. Some people deny that racism exists. We know that our preschool children, African American preschool children, if you can imagine this, are suspended at 4 times the rate of Caucasian children. That is sickening. Yet some people deny that it's even a problem. It's despicable. We have to speak up and be part of the solution and be willing to run for offices. I encourage each of you to consider doing that. Those of you that are here tonight are obviously concerned about this, or you wouldn't be here. So I encourage you to speak up, put yourselves out there, and end this racism once and for all. It's sickening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dottie, 2 minutes.
And could I have you just repeat the question again? I just got sidetracked on that
It
one.
is easy to say that racism is a problem in our country, but it is harder to address systemic racism at the public policy level. What specifically will you do when you're elected to Congress to address racial inequality in our financial institutions, schools, and our justice system?
So I think back with, the great leaders that have come before us fighting this awful tragedy of dividing us up, of Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. We have to stand strong with our own Civil Rights Act. Let's make sure that we end discrimination and that we do allow to expand to include our LGBT communities. But our other source of being able to stand up is our own voice. This is what we as Democrats are the power behind our democratic government. It's us standing up for what we believe in. And one thing that we have to stop is discrimination. I really think that we can look at strengthening many of our laws in our nation right now to make us more inclusive. that we do not deserve to live in a community or have people live in a community where they live in fear. They're not treated equally. We need to make sure we protect all of us in this great country, that we all have equal opportunity and equal share at the table to make sure we do advance this great nation forward.
10 seconds.
I do believe in people, and I do believe in the democratic platforms that we have set forward, and that we, as a party for the people, can make this stronger for all of us. Thank you.
Sue, 1 minute rebuttal.
All right. I agree with most of what has been said this evening, and we know that our criminal justice system needs to have people that are responsible within it, that will enact laws that are fair. As a member of Congress, I will vote for laws that protect all citizens. We know that our prisons are full of African American males, very often incarcerated for nonviolent crimes. That's unspeakable. We need to be sure that we elect local people that have this as their priority, so that law enforcement will be held accountable, that all levels of in the criminal justice system will be held accountable and be responsible for making sure that all of our citizens have equal care and that they are respected in the criminal justice system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dottie, 1 minute rebuttal.
You know, if we're going to address criminal justice system, we have to look at legalizing marijuana. It's not going anywhere. It's been here. It has 34 medicinal properties to it. And we need to end this practice of having it the pipeline to our prison systems. More are in prison right now for this low offense. And this is where we need to change our perception. I've been in the emergency room for over 30 years, and I can't tell you I have never seen a cardiac arrest or a respiratory arrest from pot. So we have to look at how we can change this dynamic and end this fuel that we have used to feed our prison pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to our intermission.